you very much, first of all, for the invite, Robert and Clive. Very nice of you guys to think of Gladfield to talk at your virtual meeting. It's, yes, all the way from level 3. It feels pretty good in a way, because I just saw on the news today the queues on McDonald's and KFC, so people needed their fix. Obviously, we are in a country that doesn't apply for us, but yeah, our staff is all feeling a little bit relief with some stress out for kids going back to school and things like that. So yeah, but hopefully Auckland will follow suit soon, and this will be over. And mind you, it's a good time to upskill on our home brewing, and myself been doing that as well. So definitely selling a lot of malt through homebrew shops at the moment, and thank you to you guys to keep the lights on for us while the big breweries, all the craft brewers, rejiggle things and making sure they all can sell under non-contact. So Gladfield malt, I suppose hopefully all of you has enjoyed our malts over the years. It's been a 17-year in the making. What we do, we started from virtually nothing. We had a farm, I'm from Brazil, being in New Zealand, the same length of Gladfield. So marriage and businesses go hand in hand. So let's see if we can carry on them parallel and happy ever after. The idea of Gladfield was nothing more than trying to add value to the farm. We've been growing malting barley for generations, but we've been paying the same amount as Doug's father was paying when he was same age as Doug. So there was no future on just growing malting barley and selling meat for the abattoir with the lambs. So we needed to do something to be able to offer something for the next generation. Hopefully some of you has met Doug over the years. He's a pretty unique character, very driven guy, and knows what he wants, and Gladfield will not be here without that drive and determination, because a lot of people said, nah, you can't do it. Only in Europe you can do good quality malts. It's all about the European varieties, it's all about the European technique, the floor maltings, and slowly but surely we're trying to break some tradition. We're a non-traditional business. We think outside the square in everything we do, and that has come pretty hard at the beginning, but very handy now, where everyone's trying to think outside the square. So that's been fun. Obviously, coming up with malts that never been made before, like the toffee, the shepherd's delight, and the supernova of the like. And that's all being allowed because we are not a traditionalist maltings. We are medium size, wanting to cater for the small boutique breweries, home brewers who value the quality, the value the story, and what's behind their malt. And obviously we couldn't be here without some big names supporting us at the beginning. We always shout out to I think the Emersons has been a turning point for us when they switched their Marisota to Gladfield Ale, and has put us on a map. And we've had Harringtons who just retired the brand, but they, as a local brewery, they always supported us. We then branch over to Roosters, and Hastings has always been a supporter of us, and and then so many others follow suit after that. And obviously momentum, then Gladfield bought a roaster, and if you don't know the story, the roaster was a $2 million investment for Doug and I. We own Gladfield 100%. We don't have shareholders, so it was a big call to go to the bank and ask for that money, especially when they ask, so what is the market, what size is the market, what are you trying to do, because we had to put a business case together. And they said, nah, this is nuts. You can't make it pay. The volume of specialty malts is so little, and I don't think you guys should do this. So we then decided, we'll put the farm on the mortgage and buy the roaster, because that was the only way for us to move forward, is to have different malts. It was a little bit of a war with a distributor from the importing stuffs, you know, like the European malts and the UK malts and some Australian malts. They would not sell the specialty malts if they're not buying their base. So become a political war behind the scenes, very, you know, seal war. But we needed to offer a one-stop shop for our clients, so our momentum with the base malts would carry on. Base malts is the ones that keeps the lights on, is the volume. It's you know, it's easy to make, it's easy to replicate. And so we put the roaster, it was a ton capacity roaster, and I remember when we made our first 1 ton chocolate malt, and we all kind of scratch our heads and said, okay, how are we going to sell a whole ton of chocolate malt? But yeah, I mean, you know, you have to trust your gut and believe in what you do and work hard. So we started to, you know, advertising, call in and all the brewers, telling them that we're making these different malts. And then obviously you can't just call, I don't know, like the names were all proprietary. You can't call Cara Malt. There was all trademarks. So we needed to, obviously the crystal malts wasn't that much of a secret name. But and then when you go to Redbacks and when you go to Shepherd's Delight, those there, you have to different names, and these names, it was very hard for brewers to comprehend and translating to their normal malts. They, especially Viamans was a big, and it still is a big brand, and got a lot of time for them. Actually, we mirror trying to copy what they've done. Wish I had 300 years under my belt to be that size. But, you know, and then with the freshness was something that we really push for, and then brewers are starting to understand less is more when you're using Gladfield colour malts. So, and then brewers starting to understand that, okay, that's not gonna clash with the hops, and then obviously New Zealand hops starting to really get a huge momentum. So kind of a perfect how do I say, a perfect storm for us to get where we are now. Perfect timing is like, you know, getting on the ocean and you want to chase that wave, and you're right there on the right time and the right position, the right gear, everything. And then you had a bit of a trial run before that wave had a massive momentum, and that's how we felt. We bought the roaster when we were 5 years in the business, and we felt that 5 years were enough for us to understand the market, understanding what the needs were of the brewers, so we can then start catering to their needs. And I think every business, if it goes that way, it will be successful if it backs up by quality. You can't make something that the brewers don't need. You need to start with something that they you know, are paying on their business. For them was supply chain and freshness. So we started making sure that we're not making a lot of crystal malts, we're making on demand, and that really appreciated the brewers. The brewers are really appreciated. And then to go packaging, now we have color coded bags, and that was like a wow factor for a lot of brewers. They said, oh my God, I don't mess up my brews anymore because I know that color is that malt, and has been really great and accepted. Other things that, and then obviously, and then we jump into the next phase was then, okay, brewers are telling us they are not getting hold of yeast, they're not getting hold of brewing aids, or a particular supplier is hogging that. So if you're not a Gladfield, if you're not their supporter, they're not selling these. So again, starting that silly war regarding, if you don't buy from me, you can't buy anything else. So I said, oh, well, we'll go out there and hunt for business who wants to sell in New Zealand. Got damn lucky with Lallemand. I met the Lallemand representative in Australia, who I heard off. We had the sites the same on trade show, had the sites side by side, and he was talking to someone and saying, oh, we really want to jump into New Zealand. And I just heard, and then as soon as he finished talking, I just tapped his shoulder and I said, okay, I'll do it for you. Just tell me what you need from me and I'll represent you. And that's 4 years ago. And in my opinion, one of the best things we ever done, especially the way Lallemand has evolved, which I'll talk a bit later regarding their strains and what they do. And then I've got lucky again with Murphy & Son, which is a UK, they are in Nottingham. They are manufacturers of brewing aids for the brewing industry. That's all they do. And then they become a distributor for malt, so become a one-stop shop. But like us, making malt, bringing other products, they were in the chemical industry and then brought hops and yeast to complement their range. So they make the finings, they make carrageenans, they make enzymes and things that the brewers are using more and more to consistently produce their beers. And I use them myself in my home brews, and something that we wanted to bring more awareness of those products to a homebrew level, so you guys can understand and enjoy that as well. And the story behind Murphy and Son, again, I've been lucky over the years to travel. So Doug makes the malt and I go out and sell. So it sort of makes it a good combination. He's the nuts and bolts and I am the relationship, and has been pretty good over the years. I have traveled a lot, being away from home for a long time, in long times, and it has been tough with the kids and that. So during the lockdown, it was one thing that I enjoyed the last lockdown is being home. So I made a decision there. I want to kind of move on from traveling so much and hire someone to help me out. So we hired Sebastian Aman, and he's our sales rep here for New Zealand. And it's been an interesting and very fun journey teaching him and sharing my knowledge on customers and that, and full marks to him. He's like duck to water, and he's an Argentinian guy, so sort of got the same flair, and yeah, I've got a lot of time for him. So, but I deviated there. So I was talking about Murphy and Son. So I was in China on a trade show in China. We've been lucky to have a decent distributor there. And again, the trade show, I was walking around and I saw Murphy and Son, and I've been Googling about their products, and I asked if their rep were there, and lucky enough he was. He was the sales international sales representative and manager. And I sit down with him and I said, okay, what do I need to do to get your distributor down under? And he said, just tell me that you want it, we'll make sure it happens. We've been looking to explore down under for a while, so it's good to meet you. So, just been lucky all our way, and in the right place, the right time. Does that all good? Understood? Any questions from there?
All good. So far, so good.
Probably didn't tell anything you guys didn't know. So, okay. So just talk about malts a little bit more in depth and how we make them. So I get asked a lot about, American ale and ale. What's the difference between those two? They've been in the market for a long time now, so probably a lot of people understood what they're doing. So ale is more biscuity, more catering for the that malt flavor profile beers like your stouts, your real ales, and your or even your red ales and all those very multi-forward beers. And then the American ale come in with the same color as the ale, which is the secret, but the flavor, it's more mellow, and that allows you to build like American pale ales, IPAs, style beers that you need that color, which is part of the style, but you can then brew that with less biscuity flavors, so you don't clash with your fruit salad hops that you're adding in there. And that allows you to play a lot more, like Supercharger, for example, from Penhead, that was designed for that beer. And things evolved there. Penhead and Full Amsterdam, they're gone all the way. And so it was American Ale and Toffee and Light Crystal. That's their three core malts there for their brand. So, and then we started getting a lot more comments regarding our Pilsners. We designed Gladfield Pilsner, was our first ever malt. I remember, again, similar story with the chocolate. We made 18 ton of Pilsner. Doug and I looked at each other and said, oh my God, that's a lot of malt to sell. And how are we going to go about it? Again, we just travel, rang, begged, send a malt away for free for them to trial and give us feedback, and paid off. But that malt was designed for flavor. Back in the day, 17 years ago, we had Loaded Hog, we had Miners Brewery, which is the West Coast. They're gone under again. They're something in that water over the West Coast. And then you had Harrington's, and those three and you had Lighthouse in Nelson, was a big client for us. Those guys, they all want a flavor. They're all very British style beers focused, and their Pilsner, they want it to be really Czech Pilsner. So that our Pilsner blew them away. And then the brewing world evolved and is all about the hops, and which is perfect for the maltings, because if you don't have the right malt, your beer will be thin, will be won't be balanced. So we designed the German Pilsner and the Lager Light. So the Lager Light was for Three Boys Brewery. They were complaining that our Pilsner were too dark. And so we designed the Lager Light. So Lager Light's a very unique malt because you heard of DMS, the corn fault in your beer, and it's because it's a natural component on a malt, on a grain, but 90% of that's been blown off during kilning regimes here, and that kiln, the temperature and the duration of that kiln, it blows off that DMS, and then you finish it off blown off when you boil at the brewery. But when you're making a malt that's only 2.5 EBC, and it's not a lot of color there, it means the temperature is not going to go quite high. So you're not driving that much DMS. But Doug's got a cunning plan on vents that he put it into the kiln, allowing that even though we're blowing not so much hot air, but we're actually still blowing quite a lot of air through, which is driving off those DMS. And we've been pretty happy with that Lager Light, even though so light can have the risk of DMS, and we have very little negative feedback from their malt. Lager Light's a big hero in Australia. I mean, I don't know if you ever heard or drank any of the beers from a brewery called Hop Nation. That is all Lager Light. It's in Melbourne. It's delicious. They do very hop forward beers. Obviously, Sawmill Brewery, their core malt is Lager Light, and I'm pretty happy with their beers as well. So, and then we evolved to the German Pilsner, and that's a lot of people kind of misconceived ideas about German Pilsner. So German Pilsner, think of your marshmallow malt, that's how we call it, is our nickname. So sweet, and that's it. It's no flavor to them. And the way we make the malt is that we build the colors, a bit like the same story we done with American Ale. We drive the colors, but we don't drive flavor. So duration of kiln, temperatures is all that we can tweak to allow us to have that malt in hitting the specs of a Pilsner without the flavor. And I challenge you to one day, if you're at a shop or if you have a bag of each at your house, to get a mouthful of each of them side by side, and you will know what I'm talking about. German Pilsner just disappear on your palate. It doesn't have any aftertaste. Pilsner gets a lot of biscuit, little crackers. It's quite lingering, that flavor, and a lot of brewers don't like that at all in their beers. So, like, I will use German Pilsner for any, any New England's. That's my go-to for that style. And then the sour beers are a perfect German Pilsner, and we really recommend those two. For those two styles. Why for New England? Because it's that color. It helps you build up that orange color with the light crystal and with the naked oats and the big O. It just stop that brown mess and create some lovely orange hue. And obviously for the sours, you don't want really a biscuit on your sour. So that's why I recommend the German Pilsner on that style. We have a brewery there, again, it got the German Pilsner is their house, well, not house, beer, is not how I say, is their house malt. So like Ubernaut is pretty much 90% German Pilsner in all their beers. Again, it's a marshmallow malt, so there's not a lot of flavor. It's not a malt that we're very proud of because we all punch a bunch of flavors, but sometimes constraint is a hard thing to do as well. So there's a lot of skills on not allowing that temperature, that flavor build up on that German Pilsner. And yeah, so that's what I'll talk about, the base malts, the color, and then we're going to, obviously the New England opened a whole new door for different malts and different ways of making malts. It's okay with high protein there. And so we've there been to the oat, we make Big O. And I remember asking Doug, do you think we can malt oats? And Doug said, no, we can't. Nah, it's too hard. No, let's do it. Don't even think about it. So I was in a sales trip in Australia, and I said, I'll see how that goes. And I said to Mountain Goat Brewery, and I said to Ian, the head brewer, and I said, look, because we designed the Shepherd's Delight to them. And I said, look, how about if we design malted oats? Would you use it? Would you brew that? And he said, you read my mind. I've been thinking about this, and no one else is doing, and the Thomas Fawcett's doing, but that's so thin and they get stuck on my mill. I can't use it. Come on, you can do it. So I went home and I kind of write it down what he said, and he said, I've got a name for it as well. And I said, oh, that's even better. He come up, Big O. I think it's an awesome name. I said, a lot of people got misunderstanding that Big O as well at the beginning, but I think now all settle, all understand what Big O is and means. And because the oats are so big here in New Zealand, that we're very lucky. I mean, that's probably how I should start my speech tonight. Is we wouldn't be doing these. Gladfield wouldn't exist if we were not sitting on a perfect place to grow barley. And you can only have another place like this in a German area where it's a maritime climate. You know, it's the very unique climate where you get cold spring but sunny, you know, long days, and then turns into the summer. And we're actually even luckier than German because we have the northwest winds coming from Australia, and that dries the malts, the barley, and on a paddock. We don't use drying. We only use it on a very odd season if we have to as insurance. But all our growers, which is over 100 now growing for us, they harvest below 14% on a paddock by the gods doing it their work. So, you know, it's big, it's plump, it's clean, and look appealing, and that's something that we wanted to keep using the best barley to make best malt. So that's how we come into play, because we knew we could grow good barley. And then it translated into it, and then it goes into for the maize malt as well. I mean, we grow amazing maize in New Zealand, and then so we can utilize that big size grain. Obviously now we crush it because it's so hard for brewers to crush it at their brewery. So if you wanting to use maize, again, that's all crushed and ready for you to use at your mash. And then we're going into the oats, and it's been a massive journey, because from trialing to germinate, and it's not a grain that germinates just like any other grain. It's a little bit touchy, then the wheat and barley, and then Doug trial it, and he was happy. And then we made 5 ton, and I said, cool, 5 ton is heaps. We sold in a week, gone. And then Doug said, oh my God, we open a can of worms here. And we've been playing catch up with Big O since we started. We cannot get enough volume on hand for that malt. It's incredible. And you know, it's fun because, you know, you have to agree, the hops are all, you know, the fad about it, and they're all talking about it and getting pretty good money for them. And it's good that we get a malt that get that kind of a superstar credit to it. And that's been fun journey on that. And then we got the new 2 oats, the Dihau oats, which is the Gladfield naked oats, and we got the Gladfield B&O, which is Go Nutty, which is good for stouts. My stout won't go without Go Nutty. And I think that's a rock star for that. I've got brewers brewing saison with the Go Nutty. They're getting good flavors coming from. So the Go Nutty and the GNO, the Gladfield Naked Oats, are very similar in a way. Our version of the Gladfield Naked Oats is a lot lighter than the one that you get from overseas, but so far we're happy with it, and brewers are using more and more. What else? Can we have some questions? I feel I'm talking too much.
So yeah,
Are the naked oats, are they malted as well?
No, they are just roasted.
Just roasted. And that's when I wanted to ask you about your roaster that you bought. So the process of malting, you have the kilning, which is basically the dry. You can dry at different degrees of aggressiveness, and then the roaster. So that's what, for your chocolate or for things that need a bit more of a burnt, a bit more of a. Maybe explain that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So there's two ways of finishing a malt. One is kilning. The kilning is nothing more than drying, is another word for drying. So you start your germination, and at about that 48 to 50% moisture in that grain, and the moisture is what triggers germination in the grain. So that goes happy 5 days germination. Basically, the enzymes are chopping up the starch, freeing up those sugars. And so once we are happy with the modification that those enzymes created during the germination, which is, just think about it as a seed. A seed needs an energy pod, which is an energy pod. So the plant can get the shoot through the soil and the roots established before they can get the nutrients from soil and the photosynthesis from the sun. So, but those two things only can start if they had enough energy on that grain to grow those two things without taking anything from the atmosphere or the soil. So we are utilizing that energy pod in that grain to create yeast food. So those 5 day germinating is just making sure that all that protein is chained smaller and in chunk size, so that these enzymes can come live again at mash time, and it will chop them even further and liquefying all that starch that you have on the grain. So what we do, we let the enzyme go so far, and then we kiln it. So basically we stop. How you trigger germination by moisture, you stop germination by stopping the moisture as well. So you then go get pretty hot air there. So we got a radiator, the air goes through, a hot water boiler, and the air goes through, and you start drying that for a day. And you get from 48% moisture down to 5%, which is the base malt. So it's a lot of moisture we're driving off for that 24-hour period. And that's one reason why. And you don't go any above 100 degrees, 105 perhaps for the ale. So anything above 100 degrees, you start denaturing those enzymes. As we all know, if you don't control your mash temperature, you won't get enough alcohol out of your beer. So, you know, if you mash at 100 degrees, you don't have anything at the end. And the same when you're hitting the bed for the kiln at 100 degrees, you're killing enzymes. So those enzymes go all dormant, and they will then go, we'll just bag it, and then you send it to you. That's your base malts. But the other thing we can do is in the roaster, which is from the germinated barley, we then take it to the roaster instead of the kiln. So in the germination, during the germination, they're freeing up all those sugars, and the roaster for the crystal malt replicates the temperature, and the way the roaster keeps rolling is a tumbler. So it's like a wall, a drum roaster. So the walls gets hot and hotter and hotter, and the grain keeps touching those walls and keep hotter and increasing temperature. So in that roaster, we are mimicking a mash in the brewery with the whole grain. So inside that grain, it's going to go liquid because all those enzymes have chopped those sugars to a level they're all melted, just like in the mash, and which we call this saccharification time. That's for the crystals. And then from that saccharification time that you got all those, they look like grapes, they pop like grapes. They're amazing thing to see and smell. From there, we start increasing temperatures, and then we're gonna, all those sugars that are available in that pod, we're then gonna crystallize it. Now, the light, medium, dark, the name says it, it's all about the amount of color that we put it in there. So light is quite light color, which the temperature don't go very high, and then the medium same, and dark the same. But and then we got toffee, and toffee goes not very high at all. This way it's all shriveled up. It doesn't really crystallize, and that's rocket fuel for IPAs. So just do they all? Oh yeah, we have our own lab. Is that the question? Sorry, I'm not very good at this.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Basic question.
Sorry.
You
Dean.
sent the stuff out. You're high. Thanks for thanks for coming on and talking.
Oh, good.
Yeah, just wondering if you did that, and then also so during your first few years, do you send the malt out somebody else to malt it until you, or to kiln it until you bought your own machine, I guess?
No, so Origins is that was a maltings in Leeston that belonged to the McCashins family to make Max Gold before they sold to Lion. So we heard through the Doug heard through the grapevine that they were wanting to sell that plant. And so Doug approached them and said, yeah, I think I'll buy it, but he wanted too much for it. And it was in Leeston, so it's about 20 minutes from here. And when you run a farm and had to be, maltings is a 24/7 operation, monitoring anyhow. And so we decided to buy the equipment and build the factory on a farm. And that way we had that flexibility of still the farm making the money to pay for the investment and then build it. So we always made the malt on our own. We didn't never contract it out. We started using other people's barley, probably about 3 years on, 3 to 4 years on a business that we had a major weather bomb on our farm. And I think we lost pretty much, probably it was 80% of our crops. It just rained down on Christmas, and it's just got wet and hot. It's just really odd temperature for us down here. It was too humid, and the barley germinated on the plant. So obviously that's the malting done for us there on the plant. So we couldn't use it. So for that, we decided to spread our risk and started contracting with other farmers not around us, because that weather bomb was everywhere around us. So we started looking at South Canterbury, North Otago, even Tasman. We grow some good growing grounds there as well. But yeah, we do our own lab. We got a full-time lab technician. Big investment for that, but best thing we ever done.
Good on you. It's paid off.
Gabi, I'm seeing like there's quite a few of the I call them YouTube brewers. They're saying, the malts are so well modified these days that a mashing time of 60 minutes is no longer necessary. They're saying like a 15, even maximum 30 minutes. Would you think that's kind of makes sense, or what do you think about that?
That term well modified, it is correct. We are modifying, they're modern malts. And they're even. So why would you step mash? Is because they're so uneven that you need to give the guys that didn't quite modify it a chance to then modify it. So why you step mashing? We always said you don't need to step mash Gladfield, sing infusion. 66 seems to be the magic number, and especially for IPAs and all the pale ale styles. And I do mash for 60 minutes. That's just I notice a little drop off on gravity if I don't. I think it's just good practice. The more, I couldn't be for sure. Maybe a pro brewer, when they're doing in a big kit, they probably can mash for a little less, because their sparging is going to be so long that their modification is still happening, their mash is still happening there while they sparge. But for us, I mean, I use grandfather, or even, and I've got a lot of time for the equipment, or any other equipment that's a single vessel. Our sparge is, I don't know, 10 minutes, not even that. So I would go full 60 minutes and then a quick sparge, because the job has been done.
Cool, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Now, I just, like I said, I always do an hour as well, and I don't really want to change it. It's just because another 45 minutes or half an hour, once you're already at the temperature, everything's running, just leave it. It's fine.
Yeah.
But another question I had, you talked in the beginning about some of these brand names like Carapils and stuff like that have been taken. Now, I know you call your you use the word Gladiator.
Yes.
It seems like in a lot of recipes they call for Carapils.
Yes.
But it seems like there's other companies. I mean, is it just, are there like a handful of companies that can use that name? They pay royalties to somebody?
Yeah, as far as I know, Vitamins have the trademark on Carapils. But when it was politics as well. We had to remember, we're making the distributor who had the market to himself for a long time, had to really work hard, because we were taking some of his market. So he had to pull every trick he had on his hat, and one of them was the trademark. So we had Vitamins ringing us up and reinforcing. There was a call from the head, Sabina. So she called us and say, look, I just want to make sure that you guys understand that the Vitamins have trademark on this, and that. And she made it very clear, any relation to those names, they will take us to court. So I said, wow, okay. First, I was quite humbled to receive that call in our eyes, because wow, that she took the time of her day to talk to her little maltings down under. We kind of, Doug and I knew we were into something here. So when we changed the names, we made the malt alternative, and that's the second call came in, and she said, you cannot do those malt alternatives, which is the chart that we do. Now, if you use Carapil sub for Gladfield Gladiator 121. And I said, and then that's when we're kind of a little bit more study on these things. She caught us off guard. The first call, the second call said, nah, we allowed, we're putting the register on the name. We're following the procedures with trademarks. So I'm sorry, that bullying tactic is not going to work this time. I did say to them, I said, you've got better things to do, sweetheart. So go and do your thing. Yeah, a bit of a fun story there. Yeah, but it's not easy going in a market. No one heard of Gladiator, and you need to sell it. So it made it harder for us, but looking back, it put a lot of character into our brand. Do you pilot brew using grandfathers? Yes, I've been lucky to use grandfather. I've got a good relationship with, obviously now they're owned by a competitive, and relationship has not as close as we used to, but I've got a lot of time for grandfather. I recommend grandfather to anyone. But not as a brand. It's more the idea of a single vessel, easy to clean. That's what I like about it. I've got a single tier system that I love to bits, which Sparks Engineering builder for me in Kapiti Coast. He is, he's a whiz on stainless steel welding, but he's a single tier. It takes longer. It's a lot more cleaning. Grandfather is so quick and easy. So no, if I recommend anyone to start with single vessel. Does that answer the question?
When you say competitor with grandfather, you mean because they sell yeast and malts otherwise?
Oh, they actually been bought out by BSG, and BSG owns, which is an American company, and they are a distributor for Wyman's in America, and now they are bringing Wyman's down under this. This is the way Best Malts is now in the country. Before it wasn't; it was just Wyman's. It's a long story there in Australia. There's been a war of distributorship rights for malts. So Wyman's changed to the BSG representative down there in Australia, and then Best swap to who was the Wyman's. So it's all to do with the hops. It's a can of worm hops, I'll tell you that much. And yeah, we're just staying quite clear of that. What is Gladfield equivalent to biscuit? Biscuit.
Yeah, you guys sell biscuit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just looking at that. Hey, Gabby, what about the Eclipse wheat malt? That's another new one.
Yes, it is. Good call there, Clive. Yes. Okay, so Eclipse wheat came in to sub the midnight wheat. You probably heard of midnight wheat. So it's a huskless grain, obviously wheat is huskless, so it's very smooth. It's a great malt to add color without any stringency. So if you want to brew a stout, and a stout to be pitch black, I don't know if you put your stout against the light and you see red tinge to it, well, it's good, it's nice, but it's not black. And then putting Eclipse wheat, I think it's up to between 3 and 4%, you'll get pitch black and without any flavor differences. And it's an odd word to word, but I think it's quite sexy, a black stout, in my opinion. Yeah, but again, it's a request from brewers who were buying the midnight wheat and quite hard to get hold of it. So we just said, oh, well, we'll just make it for you and become a regular after that. Good malt for black IPAs as well. If there's a very tough style. And yeah, I'll recommend that. Don't worry about any chocolates, just use Eclipse wheat.
Very interesting. And tell me about you talked about the Big O. So would you just use that as a complete substitute for oat in an oatmeal stout? And would you just use same, grams for grams?
I would have, yes, I would have grams for grams, Big O. Yes, I like Big O for the incredible mouthfeel that gives to the beer. It's none the other. And we had some blind tastings here with one that I brew, and then we had some pretty award-winning beers, the hazy. That's just at the beginning of the hazy fad. Now everyone become very pro at doing it. But at the beginning, they were struggling to balance those beers and make that color sing. And the one with the Big O really stood out for that mouthfeel. Was like milkshake. It was really nice. And the haze is so persistent. That's the problem with Big O. You can't not use and you want to clear up. So I thought like that on and another beer style that would be quite nice for that mouthfeel. It would be a hazy style, whatever you do if you put Big O on it. Obviously the stouts doesn't matter, but yeah.
So this is like, obviously I use a lot of flaked oats in my hazies.
Yep.
What's Big O going to give me extra?
Yes, so Big O, first it gives you the husk, so you don't have stuck mash, so it's in the husk. And I don't know about you, but that's me. The brewers that told me these, and then I prove it in the brewery, the oats, once you taste it, you can't take it out of your palate. It's oily, so it doesn't do very good for the head retention to your beer. So if you manage to take those oats out of the picture and use the Big O, it just improves the head retention and improve the mouthfeel without any off flavors. And the bonus is because it's on the husk, you don't need to even worry about having a stuck mash while you're brewing with Big O.
Okay, so the Big O's got less oil than a flaked oats, so therefore it's not affecting the head retention as much.
That's right. It's a different variety. And so it's not as when they roll the oats, they kind of bring that oiliness out of the grain for some odd reason. I can't explain the science behind it, but when we do the big O, we're touching that grain very little. When you're crushing it, you're not actually pulverizing that grain, you're really almost like rolling. And don't worry if it looks like it's intact. It just a little crush, it's a bit like toffee. A little crush is enough for the water to go, the mash water to go in there and do the magic of gelatinizing all your proteins there.
Okay. And then in terms of flavor between the flaked and Big O?
Again, very clean, super clean flavors. And that's what for me, it's the what I most like about the Big O is how clean it is.
Okay. Thanks, so.
No worries. So we're selling yeast and other products for brewing. Thank you, Dean. I'll touch on that. Obviously, Lallemand, it's funny because obviously I know Lallemand now, meet them on that conference. And I remember thinking when I was brewing, my biggest bottleneck, because I'm a bit spoiled, I can just walk on a warehouse and grab whatever malt I want to brew, which is pretty spoiled for a home brewer. But my bottleneck was my yeast. I said, I forgot to buy the yeast. Gee, and then it's not something that you just buy overnight. And just pissing me off. I shouldn't say that. It was really annoying me. So I said, if I start selling yeast, means that I can go like I do with the malts, and that'll be fun. And so it's been great. And once I agree with Lallemand, or verbally agree that I'll be their distributor, they sent me a whole pack of yeast for me to trial and get used to and familiarize with. And that's 4 years ago, and I never used another yeast since. And why Lallemand is it's cool. Look, it's not cheap yeast. It's a bit like it's a prime dry yeast. Hard to get the head around it. Fermenters can sell it for X, and fermenters is almost Lallemand is a lot more expensive, especially comparing with the USO5 with the BRI for the Lallemand. But it's so pure, and for home brewers who this is a hobby, I don't think price should matter too much, especially on a yeast. And if I could use liquid yeast and sell liquid yeast that galore, easy, I'll probably be doing it. But I like Lallemand because it gives me the flavors and the cleanness and the purity that the liquid yeast would give me without having to worry about, did I pitch it right? Did I propagate right? Did I arrive? How was their situation of on a plane? How was customs clearance and all that kind of thing that you don't know, and so volatile that yeast can go downhill pretty fast. And I talk about malts, I can talk about malts all day, but if you don't have a good yeast, you don't have a good beer. And it's simple as that. I've got a lot of time for yeast manufacturing. I've learned their procedures. They show me Zoom meetings on their production. They're incredible, an incredible big company too. But their attention to the market has been an amazing thing to watch. Like Lallemand was quite a conservative company, big company. They are big in the bread industry, yeast for bread. But they said, wow, we're all evolving, bringing new varieties of hops, building new varieties of malts. Let's get a new variety of yeast, new strain. Why not everyone's doing these? Only the liquid guys were doing those, weird, new, awesome new strains. So and then they come with the Verdant. Is the newest one that they have, and that's my go-to for actually any pale ales and IPAs now, because it's so it's kind of got a high attenuation, so mouthfeel is quite delicious. It's got lovely aromas and flavors that complements the stone fruit hops, your gooseberry, all those mangoes, all those beautiful aromas that the hops do. That yeast really complements it. So we've gone from a very blend base of malt base to a very flavorsome hops aromatic hops to a yeast that comes and join them all together and make an amazing beer. So if you haven't tried the Verdant yet, I hands down recommend on your next any IPA, any Pale Ale, or any New England. It's a crack of a yeast. I do recommend. And
It's also a bit of a beast of a yeast, actually. At recent brewer just ripped through it in about 3.5 days, and that was a 7% brew. So it's a ripper.
Yeah, I like it, and yeah, it's quite easy to ferment with. As I said, the high attenuation does forgiven a little bit as well, so you don't dry that beer out too much. Obviously, a hero for me. I've got 2 more favorite strains from Lallemand. One is Voss, which is all the the good old Kvik strains, which not many people are talking about that anymore, but it's an incredible strain. Very easy to use, 40-degree fermentation. I can do a brew in half the time because I don't need to cool my beer that long, and I love it. And 40 degrees seems to be, for me, the best temperature to ferment. I've got a fermentation where I can control my temperature, heat or cold. So keeping 40 degrees is a breeze. And again, I'm dry hopping on a second day of that I pitch the yeast because the gravities have come down so fast. If you haven't experimented with Voss, just do it for shits and giggles because it's hilarious how fast it is. It just turns whatever you think of brewing upside down, really. I love it. I love that alchemy, and that, in 3 days, you could potentially be cold crashing. So if you're in a hurry to drink beer, that's the yeast to use. And it's easy to pitch. You find it on our website, the pitch rate, or is a pitch calculated in Lallemand website as well. And the third favorite strain, I don't know if you all like sours. I'm a big fan of sours. Fruit sours is my favorite. I've got quite traditional staff members in here, and when I brewed my raspberry sour, it was the first beer they asked for the second lot. So I was very surprised that all of them really enjoyed the raspberry sour. And I use the Philly sour, and Philly sour is awesome. And it's one of those yeasts that, again, like Voss, blow your mind away, and just for shits and giggles, do a sour with it, because you don't need to kettle sour, so you just brew the beer as you would normally. And then when you transfer to the fermenter, you pitch that yeast, and that will ferment and sour at the same time. It's incredible. You don't need to measure the pH. It does it all for you. It's just amount of sugars you have in there. Obviously, higher gravity, more the sour the beer will be, because it goes on producing the sour based on the sugars they are eating. Yeah, great thing to use, and clean. It doesn't contaminate your kettle. I've got brewers like, rock star brewers doing sour beers with the Philly sour, and they're just designating one fermenter for that. Their kettle are never unutilized anymore. They are brewing full tip for, and using the fermenter as the kettle and avoiding contamination.
Yeah, I love that yeast. It is the highest scoring beer I've got today, and there's a raspberry sour as well. I've got another one on at the moment, actually. But I also have to say that I was using Mangrove previously, and I did get a couple of faults in the competition, and I took that on board. And I've actually found that since I got Lallemand, it is actually a bit cleaner, as you say. So I have got better results since switching. So, nice
Thanks for the feedback, mate. Yeah, I see that myself. It is cleaner. You're paying for what you're getting, put it this way. How is so you said you just touch that. Oh, the other products, maybe we need to do another one of these.
Well, before you go there, Gabi,
yes.
With the Philly sour, are you fermenting at 25?
Fermenting, top of my head. Yeah, it is in a woman at 20, 22. Yep.
Because I found, like, for 4 days it went like a train, but then it went quite slow.
No, I never had a problem like that. Reese, what was your gravity?
Oh, I think it was under 5.
So if you have that experiment, sometimes what the brewers do, the pro brewers do, they put dextrose. I can tell
Yes.
you, I can.
Oh, yeah.
probably send you-
I had some cane sugar in there as well for easy sugars, so it
Yeah.
did that for that first sort of phase. But it was definitely, you could see a line on the tilt, the way it starts like this, and then kind of level, and it was doing like a gravity point a day sort of thing. But I mean, it got there in the end and made a good, bloody good beer. But
yeah, well, it took its time.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know why would it do that. Did you raise the temperature when they're going sluggish?
I think I did a wee bit, but then I was in no hurry, so I just let it be. So
Yeah.
but we did that for the Western Brewers Conference. We did a wild beer, a wild beer. I think it's 25C or something like that. So you had to do a sour, but then you had to add fruit as well. So but a lot of the beers had that, and they were, it worked really well with fruit. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It does really well. It's so easy to use, and again, you don't need to worry about going checking the pH and making sure that it doesn't go too far, which some beers do, unfortunately. And the fairly sour is pretty easy going on that respect.
And while we're on pH, you want to talk about sour grapes for a wee bit?
Yep, absolutely. So sour grapes is obviously is a pH correction malt. It grows in its own barley. The way you make it, you kind of enticing that with some lactic acid, and then the barley takes over from there during the last stages of germination. We have a proper kiln, germination kiln vessel that we make that malt. It's quite at the beginning it was quite high tech. Now we've got the recipe and kind of a following a nose there, but it is 1% of that lowest 0.1 of your pH. So if you know your mash pH looks like it's going to be 5.8, so you will need 3% to lower to 5.5. Does that make sense? 3% of the grist to lower to 5.5. It's very easy. It's very safe. And then once safe, I mean, it's kind of an easy to use, because once you hit, he's here. Doug is here. Because once you hit, you know that you're going to need 300 grams on that brew to get your pH down. And that's a safe bet. You just put the sour grapes all the time, and you don't need to guess it anymore. There we go.
There you go. How are you, Doug? Welcome.
G'day, Doug. Robert here. How you doing?
Pretty good beer, are you?
Yeah, thanks for making time, mate.
No worries. It's all good.
You still been out? You've been out working still?
Oh, just on a wee bit, but actually I've been trying to teach the young fella how to read. He's dyslexic, and I'll tell you what, it's quite trying sort of a job, man. Yeah, he's doing all right. He's coming along good. Yeah.
Good.
One more question I was going to ask is just around, so back to the grains, but in terms of something I've always wondered, that lager light versus American ale.
Yeah.
When do you use each? What's the big difference between them? Why is there a shift towards lager light?
Yeah, it's to do with lager light. If a brewer switch to lager light, for example, brewers like Sawmill, for example, it's because they want to use a malt that they can then build from it. So, for example, one house malt allows them to build any recipe from that. For example, he's building then build his APA or XPA. Lager light fits that. Don't need to add any more malts for color. But if you then switch to make his doctor, and then he'll just add more, a bit of an A or a bit of other malts and build from there. But the base is always the same. That's how they use kind of the lower color malt to then build flavors from it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So in terms of if you're going to describe the two flavor differences between those two.
Yep.
Okay, so a lager light, yeah, it's a very neutral, very light flavour. The American ale is, yeah, it's quite neutral as well. So it's got a wee bit more maltiness to it, perhaps, than the lager light. Not a lot. We've tried to keep the maltiness out of the American ale. That's sort of, I mean, if you want malty flavour, you're going to go to a traditional Pilsner. Yeah, so there's not a lot of major differences, just really probably this the colour. I mean, that's the reality. When we're kilning it, we're trying to keep that really light colour and the lighter light. And like Gabi says, it leaves opportunity for the brewer to do whatever he wants. If he wants it really light beer, he's got that, but he can add in the malt flavours by adding Vienna malts and Munich malts to the grist and build on that. So yeah, it's a good base malt.
Yeah, I mean, they seem really similar apart from colour, so that's why I was so curious. I've used both. I've used quite a bit of lager light as well, so I was just a bit curious. Yeah.
I think the other thing with lager light, I would perhaps add a little bit more boil to it, just to drive that DMS if you have had a problem in the past. But if you haven't had a problem, it means that your boil is vigorous enough and is driving everything out. But traditionally, you know, a 90-minute boil, if you use lager light, is recommended.
Yeah, I've just been doing 60, no issues at all.
Well, if there's no issues, means that your boil it's pretty decent.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So how is the whiskey malt business going? Oh yes, it's very politic whiskey, isn't it, love? But it's good. We made peat smoked, which we set out to do of heavy peat, and that's good on Doug. He's got quite radioactive there for a few days after he smoked the peat, and then we do the manuka and always improving that smoke. You know, it's fun.
Yeah, the old manuka ones are really interesting. We've been playing around with the way we smoke that. I'm getting some really intense phenols coming through here. But yeah, it's just, I suppose everybody understands and knows peat smoke, and they understand what those flavours are. So, you know, when they're drinking whiskey, they always want to stick to their comfort zone. I suppose the manuka thing is slowly catching on. But overseas is where we're getting a lot of traction with our distillers' malts. And so, yeah, it's New Zealand is a very young market for young industry distilling wise, and I think a lot of the biggest problem with distilling is that there's not a lot of freely available information and experience in New Zealand, and as a result of that, people sort of hanging on to what knowledge they do have. And also the lack of capital. Obviously in New Zealand, we're a small nation here, and the reality is we just don't have the capital that they have in some of these other nations. And distilling is an extremely capital intensive business to get involved in. And, you know, it's all about volume. And at the end of the day, you need to have good volumes of product that you can blend away later on. And it takes so long before you can get a product and build up a brand and a name. And one of the things I just never really understood with a lot of distillers in New Zealand is that they've never taken on the fact that you've got to create a point of difference. So why make a single malt Scotch whiskey when there's millions and millions of litres of that made all around the world? How are you going to distinguish yourself? So why don't you capture some of these New Zealand flavours and right off the back of that and try and create a brand overseas and
they're quite conservative,
yeah,
isn't it?
and try looking at that market, because the New Zealand market's pretty tiny when it comes to consumption. And you know, so you've got to think outside the square, and that's what we've done with our malt business, and that paid dividends. If we'd just carried on and played the normal game and just, yeah, we wouldn't have had the ability to be able to service the local industry the way we have if we hadn't tapped into the export market and created that cash flow and the ability to create size. You need to have size in your business if you want to be able to create consistency and be able to keep innovating.
Good. Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's selling a lot of gin right now so they can make some money while they're waiting for their whiskeys to, age and become commercially viable. But it's probably a nascent industry for New Zealand. It's got a lot of promise. I think it's whiskey becoming, ever more popular, overseas. So see what happens.
Yeah, it's a waiting game, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's going to be interesting.
Oh. Hey guys, I just got a quick question for you. How are you? Long time no
G'day,
see.
Dave. How are you doing?
Cool. Smoking malts. If you're going to smoke your own malts, because we've got some other, some really good sort of woods available. I mean, like Reese did a Putakawa smoked one a while ago, but he smoked his own grains. It was cracking. Any tips for what do you use as your base malt for smoking?
Okay,
And
so
if you got any tips, if you're going to smoke your own malt, how would you? Any tips, advice from someone who's doing it on a large scale?
Okay, so the reality is to get the phenol levels up, it's all about the amount of smoke. The more smoke, the more phenols. And so whatever it is that you're burning, whether it be peat or whether it be wood chips or whatever, you need to, the more you burn of it, the more flavour you're going to get into it. And that's what we've learned. Also, you don't get a lot of smoke flavour going into the green malt. Yes, you can smoke the green malt for a length of time, but it's the actual drying out phase. So as you're drying the malt, the smoke particles stick to the outside of the grain. So it's when you get that temperature change and the moisture change in the grain. So that's what you want to be aiming for, getting really intense smoke there during that drying out phase. A lot of people play around wetting it again and all the rest of it, but every time you wet it, you're washing smoke particles back off again. The other thing with smoke that we have noticed too is that as soon as you finish smoking it and you taste it, and you can't really taste a lot of smoke flavour there, and you think, what's going on? And then it's amazing, after a few days or a week, all of a sudden that smoke intensity comes into the grain. And I always remember the first time we did some Manuka smoking, and I spent ages with this wee prototype smoker, and at the end of it, I remember tasting it, and I said to the team, I said, oh, this is a waste of time. I can't taste any smoke flavour in it at all. And then the next day, everybody went into the lab and tried the samples and said, wow, this is blowing their head off. And yeah, so that was one thing that we noticed. It's about, depending on, obviously with the peat smoke, we've found the different types of peat have a big impact. You've got shallow peat and deep peat. I mean, they all have different levels of phenols when we're burning it. And obviously also just the moisture content when we're smoking. Obviously you don't want to have flame, and you don't want to have steam going into your malt when you're smoking. You just want smoke. So trying to get that balance is really key. And it's all up to the person who's feeding that peat or wood chip onto the fire. It's a real art. I've got a number of staff here, but I've selected 2 guys plus myself that will only allow to do the smoking. You've either got or you haven't, and you've got to have a real passion for that sort of thing. But creating the amount of smoke is key. You've got to get as much as you can in there.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, so we have when we push yeast under pressure fermenting. Yes, I have Williams Morn keg fermenter. It's pretty cool, especially with Voss. I can drink it in five days, so it's pretty cool. Never saw any different flavors, but probably haven't brewed enough to know that. Probably was about 3 or 4 batches under pressure. It's quite speedy though. I like it. The lagging phase for the yeast, it's a lot quicker.
So only with the Quebec yeast, you say?
That's the only one I had experience with, Chris. But I presume, yeah, I do recommend. It makes sense to a lot of. I'm not against it. Put it this way.
So that 40 degrees, was that under pressure or was that just natural fermentation?
Just natural.
Yeah. And what and when you are doing pressure, what sort of schedule you're following?
Oh, the fermentation pressure?
Yeah.
I don't. I'm on a triple S conical fermenter. I only use pressure to transfer the beer to the keg.
Okay.
Yeah. Have you used Felisaire? Oh, Chris, nah, you go 40, mate. You enjoy that. 40 is pretty cool. Have you used Felisaire? Yes, love it. And then Dave, regarding the sourness, is dextrose as your secret there to balance the sourness. It is an article on Lalaman about how to use the Felisaire. If you search Felisaire, you will see a presentation on how much dextrose you need to use it to balance that sourness.
Is dextrose going to change the gravity of your beer match too, or is it because it's readily fermentable, it has more of a proportionate impact on the sourness? Cool.
That's it. It's just the yeast backing off on your other sugars to give you that mouthfeel. I think it's, in my opinion, it's not actually the acidity that goes low, it's your perception that goes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, all the buffering too.
That's it. Yeah. You're selling any malt into Europe? Odd one. We know over the years a little bit. Well, it's like selling ice to Eskimos down there, isn't it?
Well, we've had inquiry, but the reality is, especially now with COVID and everything else, it's just not practical.
Yeah.
But we have had a bit of inquiry. But yeah, as far as the interesting one though is the distiller's malt into Scotland. So we had orders all lined up, and then with the shipping containers, we haven't been able to get that one off the ground. But that was one we've got quite excited about, and we've sent stuff into the UK on a number of occasions, just to some of our different specialty malts. But yeah. The area that we really wanted to get into is America, and we have massive amount of inquiry in America, but we've never been able to get that one off the ground because every time we're about to go that area, our existing markets keep growing, and we want to make sure we look after them, because the last thing we want to do is run existing customers out. And as it's turned out, we're probably lucky we didn't go into America now with cost of shipping containers and what have you. So Australia's is our biggest market outside New Zealand, and then Asian countries locally here, and that's where we're aiming. But yeah,
so it's not going to be like the hops then, where it's how much you can grow is the actual issue.
No, the biggest, I guess, the issue we've got right at the moment is just how much energy Gabi and I have got. Yeah, I mean, we could keep growing in business, but we want to just really probably focus a bit more now on the kids that are at an important age now where we really want to mentor them. And it's no point us traveling. Well, obviously, we can't travel around the world, and we can't be everywhere. So we've used this time really just to now mentor our children in the business. They really are passionate about what we do. They live and breathe it with us all the time. Obviously, we live on site, so naturally they're in the factory and in the labs and in the office and all that. And that's where we're just trying to train them up on the technicalities of things and teaching them the basics with communication and that. And you know, it will only be another 4 or 5 years, and you know, they'll be really starting to take over the reins, and that's hopefully when they're going to be able to inject more energy and we can go to the next level.
You mean retire?
I don't. Farmers never retire, so yeah, it's not something that we sort of think about along those lines. But you've got to keep bringing in new blood, and they inject that new lot of energy. I was like that when I was young, and I was always, you know, 3 or 4 yards in front of the old man, and it's what, you know, keeps it going. And that's in my mind sustainability. Yeah, so that's the key. We've got plenty of production capacity here left with the business we've got at the moment. We're lucky we got in and built as much as we did in the last few years. And so yeah, we'll slowly keep increasing making the most of that production capacity, and then yeah, maybe another 4 or 5 years we'll have another push. We'll see what happens. But hey, look, a lot of businesses at the moment are really struggling with staff. There's just not the resource around. So hey, if we go into these other markets and open it all up, we need more staff, and there's just not enough people there that have got the same sort of passion that we're looking for out there. And so, you know, let's just hold off for a bit and see what happens. I mean, that's my sort of thinking. And, you know, like I said, I just got a young Trev there. He's dyslexic. I need to teach him how to read before he can do anything else. So that's where a lot of time gets spent, you know.
I've got a dyslexic son up here in Auckland, and he's enjoying his time on the Mags farm. So maybe I might need to send him down south and spend a summer down with you guys or something.
Yeah, well, we should compare notes. I've just trying this new system with young Trev, and actually I'm having some amazing results. Actually, within 10 days, I was able to get him to read a book, which he's never been able to do before. So I'm just trying things the old Doug way, and it's. I remember I had the same problems when I was his age, and yeah, throwing the old the new modern way out the window, and I'm just sort of going back to some old school stuff, and it seems to be working with him. But yeah, he's just actually. I know we're getting off subject a bit here, but he's just earned himself a bow and arrow tonight. We're on a point system. So when we first started out, we got rid of the TV, and I said, you know, you got to get 10,000 points before you get TV back. But before that, we had a few other wee things. So we got to 5,000 points. He gets a bow and arrow. So he just earned 5,000 points tonight. So he's really excited. He's going to go Gun City as soon as it's open after lockdown. He's got one there he wants. So.
Oh, good on you.
Oh, cool. Just one of the last, with the smoke, I think we touched there. It's just not commercially viable to do any other types of smoke at the moment, unless you want to do a 20-ton. Come and talk to us. What's the main barley variety you use? How much does that vary by year? And there are many malts you try to use a particular variety for.
Okay, yeah, cool, good question. So there's three main varieties that we're using. Tavern is the main star that we've used for right since we started making malt, and that's an old English variety that was originally bred for Guinness, and we find that is actually a really good barley variety. It allows us to keep our cob arcs down, and so that we're not getting these super high fans and super high modified malts, and also it also gives us quite good low colours when we're kilning. So the Tavern is a really nice variety for that. We've got the what's the other one? Planet, which is a really good malt for giving good extracts, and we're able to play around with that malt now, and we're really starting to learn how to get some really good results with that. And the other one that we've got is Laureate, which is the distilling variety, and that is really exciting. It's giving us extracts that are absolutely through the roof. So we're just trying to work out how we can improve how we malt that to make it into a more craft type malt. And the challenge there is try and keep the fermentability down for the craft brewers who are all malt brewing. So that's the challenge in the malt house. But yeah, it's incredible. It's giving us extracts better than some of the wheat malts, which is unheard of. Alcohol yield when in distilling is really good. The only trouble is with the Laureate, which we're finding, is that it has a really long dormancy, so water sensitivity is quite an issue early on in the season. We have to store it for quite a while before we can start malting it. But that's the beauty about the Planet. We can pretty much malt that straight away after harvest. It's got a smaller dormancy period. Yeah, so we use all those varieties for all the different types of malt we make. Obviously, we don't use Tavern or Planet for the distillers malts or smoke malts, only the Laureate. But otherwise, yeah, it all goes in. And the reason why we want more than one variety is because each year a variety will do better than another variety based on the season. It might be a wet or rainy season or a dry season, and different different diseases are more present. So if you just got one variety, it might fall over one year. Where if you've got three varieties, then that gives you a little bit more security. One variety is always going to outperform the others. And so with our growers, we like to contract that quite evenly across the board. And the other thing, of course, too, is that we spread all our growers out across South Island, so we're not all growing all in one area. If we have a weather bomb and say, for example, in Ashburton, then we've still got our Ellesmere growers or South Canterbury growers to back us up. Yeah, we've got nearly 150 odd growers that are contracted to us now, and we do that through PGG Wrightson's, and we've got a really good team of network of people there growing for us. But yeah, there's new varieties coming out all the time, but you got to make sure that they are going to give us a benefit. So we're not too quick to bring new varieties on unless we think that they're going to perform for us.
Do you notice the difference between those regions? Like obviously you mass put them all together, so obviously they'll even out. But are you noticing difference?
Not really. A lot of people talk about this provenance things, but the reality is that when you think about the way the grain's grown, it's the management conditions on the farm. So what sort of inputs they're doing. It's about the weather conditions and climate conditions at harvest. And then once that grain comes in, it doesn't really matter where it's come from around the South Island. We don't notice any difference. But you think about it, we can take one lot of grain and we can grow it 10 different ways on one particular farm with different management inputs. Then we can bring it in and we can steep it with 10 different steeping regimes. We can germinate it with 10 different germination regimes, and then we can kiln it with 10 different kilning recipes. And before you know it, you've got an infinite different flavour profiles. And to be able to keep someone to pinpoint back to different areas is impossible, really. So I don't really believe in that provenance that much. I think it's more about just the way you malt it. There's a lot about the way you grow it as well. Certain growers are better than others. There's no doubt about it. And we've got some growers that we know are always going to give us good quality every time. We've got other growers that's always a bit hit and miss.
I mean, I was just thinking like that. So NZ Hops, cooperative, where they're sort of sharing that information to sort of get that evenness across the board. You guys doing things like that?
Sorry, what was that?
So like with NZ Hops, obviously they're trying to share that information to get like a even product across the board. You guys sort of sharing information between the different growers to get that?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, and that's what we do with the team with PGG Wrightson. So we've got, I think there's 15, 20 odd reps that go around. We have a meeting with them here each year and go over different things and point things out. It's a bit of a tightrope you walk though. I mean, farmers pretty proud sort of people, so you got to be careful you don't want to turn around and tell them how to suck eggs. But at the same time, you just gently push them in the right direction on certain things. Biggest issues we have as over the last few years, equipment's got bigger and bigger. One of the areas that we've noticed we've had to educate a lot more on is that at harvest time, big harvesters, really high capacity, grain's getting harvested really, really quickly, and the grain doesn't have time to cool down before it goes into the silos, bigger and bigger silos. We get grain sweating and it reduces the germination energy and things like that. In the old days, it might take you 3 days to harvest, a couple of 100 tonne, and it used to trickle into the soil, had a chance to cool down. But you think the grain sitting out in the paddock on a day that's say 28 to 30 degrees, the actual temperature of the grain can get up to 40 degrees. And when it's getting harvested in such fast quantities, it doesn't cool down at all. So we've got to educate the growers into cooling it down their silos, putting fans in and things like that. That's one of the things that I've noticed probably in the last 10, 15 years. But look, on the whole, the New Zealand farmers are really, really up there technology-wise, and they do a pretty good job. And I think, you can tell with our malt, at the end of the day, we're only half the battle. You can't make a silk purse out of sow's ear. And the reason why I believe our malts are so good is because of the quality of the grain. And the other thing is too, we try to make sure we only have growers that have got irrigation, and that gives us really good consistency from season to season. And that's one of the issues in Australia. And a lot of these intercontinental countries, it's boom or bust in those places. If they have a good year, it's a good year, but it might be 1 in 5. We are here in New Zealand, we can have a drought and it doesn't make any difference. The grain quality is exactly the same with irrigation. It's really, really important. Grain fill at the right time, it keeps your beta gluten contents down, and it makes sure that you've got really good, consistent, even grain, and it's nice and plump. And that's really the thing. And the other thing is, of course, we've got pretty good even soils here in New Zealand, in the arable areas. And yeah, so all in all, I think the secret to Gladfield malt is the barley that we grow here in South Island.
So around sustainability and that water supply, is that going to become a thing?
I think you got to really understand how the aquifers and everything here work in Canterbury. There's just
so much runoff.
Yeah, well, there's so much rain that goes on. Yeah. I think I was talking to a scientist there a few years ago when I was at Lincoln University, and they did an experiment trying to work out how much water falls on the main divide and how much of that water actually goes out in the main rivers. And they found out that it was only probably about 10-15% of it actually went out in the rivers, and the rest of it's going through the aquifers, and it goes through the aquifers pretty quick. I mean, you only have to go off the coast of Canterbury, and there's places there where there's just fresh water welling up out in the sea there, and it's quite well documented. So there's plenty of water there, and every year that gets recharged. I mean, you know, you've got to be a wee bit careful what you hear and say in the media. Classics, the old Selwyn River. You hear that every time in the media, every time somebody wants to talk about the environment. We live on the banks of Selwyn River. We lived here all our lives. And you know, a lot of the stuff that you hear is from people that live up the other end of the island, never actually even visited the Selwyn River, and they're saying things and whatever you. So, hey, look, from a water point of view, you're never going to run out. That's the reality. It's a well-managed resource. The guys that are doing, you know, what we're doing here, if you come out onto the farms and have a look around, we're way ahead of pretty much any other industry in New Zealand, and that's because we've had the spotlight been on us for a long time now, whereas a lot of industries haven't had that. And if we turned the spotlight around, I think there'd be a lot of embarrassment in some of the other industries. What I see even walking around breweries and that, you know, I see some of the wastage and some of the water and that goes out down the drain, and just some of the inefficiencies and the way people's production goes. And I think, crikey, if you guys had to put up with what the microscope that farmers are on all the time, they wouldn't last too long. We have a lot of audits here all through the year. There's always people checking out everything we do, nutrient budgeting, you name it. There's a lot of new regulation going on. Things have changed massively in the last, 5 to 10 years. It's been quite daunting, really. But full marks to 90% of the farmers have taken it on board, and there's been some big improvements. One of those areas is minimum tillage, something that we pioneered ourselves going back 17 odd years, a thing called cross-slot drills, which is invented here in New Zealand. It's amazing technology, and that's all we've ever used here, and it's built up a massive amount of carbon in our soil. You think every year we grow the barley, you think of the barley plant stands about 1 metre or so tall, and of that, same amount below ground. So that's how much carbon we're putting back into the soil every year. So things like that that don't get talked about. There's been a massive improvements in the nitrates, for example. We've got these new nitrogen inhibitors and fertilisers. One of the products that we use now, Sustain, have these coatings on it. We're making massive gains all the way along, and we're pretty proud of that. But yeah, one of the things that we've been trying to do, of course, making malt is really high, has a high carbon footprint. Obviously, the biggest issue is the heating. We sprout the grain, we put water with it, and then we've got to get rid of the water. And so that's one of our things that we've been trying to do, is trying to turn that into a sustainable resource of
You mean the hot water coming off?
Well, when we kiln the malt, the green malt, obviously there's up to around 45% moisture, and then out of the kiln it comes down to 5% moisture. You've got to drive all that moisture out, and of course the only way you can do that is through producing hot air. And what do we use to create that heating source? It's quite interesting at the moment. We've got 2 big dairy giants right. We can see them from one end of the farm to the other. We've got Fonterra out at Gladfield there. They've got a massive big milk factory there, and we've got Synlait at the other end, and they're massive users of coal for obviously making the milk powder. What are their options? they can't go electric because there is not enough power in the grid, and the lines don't have the ability to transfer that electricity, even if there was. There's not enough trees here in Canterbury. They're all in shelter belts, and that's about it. What else do you use? So yeah, there's some pretty big questions coming up for everybody, and we're trying to lead that ourselves here at Gladfield, coming up with other ideas. But once you start doing some research into it, you start to realise it's not quite as simple as you think.
John's got a question for the different base malts. How much difference is there in moisture content at the start of kilning? Same, isn't it?
Start of kilning, there's no difference in moisture content. No, they're all the same.
Just want to say something. So I recently spoke to one of the homebrew shops, and they actually said that your malts were actually the easiest to crush across the ballpark. So well done. So this guy, it was quite interesting actually. I had to adjust water and everything because all of a sudden my efficiencies went up by 10 to 15%, just by using a different home guy. So I was like, well, what's going on? And he said, like I've been playing with my mash and playing with my different grinding stages and stuff like this. But he said, you guys were actually the easiest to program. So just well done.
Oh, thanks very much.
Thanks.
And that's probably the consistency of the product that you're making is actually mean that he can actually dial in his thing to get
the mill gap. Yeah.
To get the mill gap exactly right, to get that sort of extra efficiency.
Yeah, you name it. It's been one of the biggest winning for Gladfield is that consistency in grain size. We screen our malts and
it's consistency is really important because right from day one we realised what the market really needs, and the craft brewers need that consistency because the reality is they don't have the ability to blend their beers like the big breweries. They don't have acres and acres of bright tanks, and they don't have an army of foot soldiers that are able to test the process all the way through the brew house and make adjustments and add a whole lot of bits and pieces. So you've got to have real consistency when you're craft brewing and obviously home brewing as well. So that's where we built the business right from the beginning on that consistency, and that's the key really.
There's also been comments that people are, obviously this COVID thing led the use local, but it's also a perception that you guys are a bit fresher because it's not traveling halfway across the world. So how do you feel about that?
Pretty good. Yeah, no, it is good, and it's interesting you say that because well, I'll tell you an interesting story, right? So when we started into the malt business, it was quite hard to sell, and I'm talking about the craft side of it and the craft brewers. It was a pretty hard sell, and the reality is that a lot of people thought unless it was imported, it wasn't good quality, and that was sort of come about through the 80s, 70s, and 80s, where it had to be Italian, it had to be German or whatever, whether it be malt, or whether it be cars or whatever it was. And that New Zealand just sent all their product over to the islands because that was the only people that used to buy our stuff. And so that was a pretty hard mentality to break into. And, but we slowly got a few local brewers on board, and they said, oh, this is really good. And it was a wee bit like the wine story when people said, oh, let's grow some grapes here in New Zealand, but we don't really back ourselves, so let's get some Italians over here and ask them what they think. And of course they came over and had a look around Blenheim and all that, and they thought to themselves, Jesus Christ, we don't want to let these buggers know about how to grow grapes because they're going to really blow us out of the water. Let's just tell them, nah, it's not a good place to grow grapes. I wouldn't bother with it. And that put the whole industry back about 20 years. And then finally some locals decided, let's have a crack. And then look what happened. And then, obviously we're making the best Sauvignon in the world. And it's exactly the same bloody story with the malt. So we got into this malt and we started making it. And we had a few guys come on board, and they said, oh, actually, this is not too bad. And then we had other brewers come on board and said, oh, no, it doesn't taste like that European stuff. And my famous saying back to them was, yeah, well, when I drink your beer, it doesn't taste like that other stuff. Oh, it doesn't have that cardboard flavour, so it can't be any bloody good. And of course, all of a sudden it started to dawn on them. They realised, oh, hang on, now we know what real malt's supposed to taste like. I said, yeah, that's the key. And but then there was always still a few people that were really hard to swing over, and we probably got all the low-hanging fruit, and we got probably, I don't know, 70% of the New Zealand business. And then after that, we thought, well, this is impossible. We can't swing some of these other guys over. They're just too hard-headed about it. So that's when we went to Australia. And then I thought to myself, I've got a bloody brainwave. So what we did is we sent a container of malt into China. I went over to China and started talking to some craft brewers over there. And they got really excited about it. So we started sending containers over there. And I thought, this is great. So what I did is I went around some of these hard heads that we're prepared to buy a product. I said, oh, shit, we're exporting into China. And they go, oh, shit, you guys are exporting. Well, you guys must have good product. And it's just a mindset. And it's really quite interesting, really. And so, yeah, tell them you're exporting somewhere and all of a sudden they think gives you credibility. And just for, obviously there's different, every customer has a different way of looking at things, but yeah, so that was bloody interesting. And yeah, but then we've got, since COVID, we had a whole lot more come over and realise, oh yeah, it's really easy to get hold of when you've got containers coming across from the other side of the world and they can't get hold of it. All of a sudden they were giving us a ring, and that was a good feeling. Yeah.
I got one other question for you before you go, and that is malt storage. I mean, like, in commercial breweries, you're pretty much using a sack as soon as you open it. But for home brewers and even in homebrew stores, a sack might be there for a day, a week, or an awful lot longer.
Yep.
What's your advice in terms of, like, once you open a sack, it's real, quality life term, and how should you be storing it?
Well, here's a good tip. So it's about keeping the air out of it, because malt's extremely hygroscopic. In other words, it wants to suck up moisture. It'd be great to throw in your wood drum if you want to keep dehumidify things. What I would do is, if you've got an old sack from the last bag of malt that you've used and it's empty, I would put the sack that you got half empty inside an old sack, and so you've got double tied it. And so that gives you a double membrane or keeping the moisture out. That would be one of the easiest things to do. And there's things you buy at the supermarket that you can close over. I don't know where you get those things. You put over the sacks to close them up. Mm-hmm. You just got to keep the air out of it. That's the key, and keep them out of any humid area. And I think that's the key. If you can do that.
Good advice.
Yeah.
And if you keep it moist, if you keep it dry, how long can you realistically, use a sack for? I mean, should you be sort of really only buying what you can use within a couple of months, or how long will a sack last?
Okay, well, I would be trying to use something up once you've opened it up, within 2 or 3 months. But I mean, the reality is, if you were to put it in your hot water still in the cupboard, and it was in another sack, and you keep it well and truly airtight and keep it dry, up to 18 months, it'd be good as gold. But I think with your coloured malts, they're like your herbs and spices when you're cooking. So that's what gives you flavour. So yourself, if you got herbs and spices and you leave them open in your pantry for any length of time, they start to really lose their punch. And it's the same with coloured malts. So I really encourage you just to buy small amounts, like 1 kilo maximum of your coloured malts, and keep them in an ice cream container or sealed container, or if you can vacuum pack them out and keep them again in your hot water still in the cupboard, and keep them nice and dry. And yeah, they'll keep, but yeah, they just sort of lose that real punch of flavour.
Yeah. Thanks.
That's great, man. You guys are probably getting a bit tired.
Nah, I never get tired.
Yeah, well, I'm just gonna say, like, I fully appreciate you guys coming on tonight. I've learned a lot. I've just been all grain brewing for about last 1 year. Brewed a fair few brews since then, but primarily using your product and had a really good run with it. So really appreciate your time tonight.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, thank you.
It's great to talk to you guys. Yeah, it's great talking to passionate people, and that's one of the things that we really enjoy doing. So, yeah.
Mate,
But
I just
Gabi,
want to know
tell-
what you have for breakfast, because I never see you. You're not just full of energy.
Oh.
It's amazing.
Well, it's funny you say that because I've just had to change. Gabi reckons I'm getting fat on it, so she says I'm going to have to start cutting back. I'm not allowed to have egg and bacon anymore. So, the last 2 mornings I've been in the old Nutrigrain and a bit of fruit salad, but that only gets me through to about 8 o'clock, and I'm going, geez, I'm getting bloody hungry on it, and I get a bit growly. So, I don't know. I think I might get back to those egg and bacon again. I think.
Awesome.
Now, did Gabi tell you about that little episode? Did you tell her about the episode with the keg there?
Oh no, I didn't. I had a massive meltdown on Saturday. I brewed a golden rye, and I haven't brewed for a long time, so finally got into the groove. And on Saturday, I had to take the trub out. Just open the ferment and get the dead yeast out and the hops. Last thing to do with the beer the next day is transfer into the kegs and start carbonating. My racking arm came off, which I knew about it, but didn't think there would be any problems. Opened the valve to take it off, and the racking arm got stuck into the valve, and I could not shut the valve. So I had 50 liters of beer gushing out on my lap and all through my pile of brewery, and yeah, I just want to cry. Yeah, it was pretty tough.
You couldn't get your thumb over the end then.
Yeah, she panicked.
I panicked. I just absolutely panicked, and then the harder I tried to shut the valve, I think the worse it got, and to the point where probably halfway through, and I said, "Oh, stuff it."
Walk
We
away.
had to brew again, and
Oh,
the clean
no.
up, and yeah. I brew with one of my staff, 2 of my staff members. They're quite keen to learn the brewing process, and I had to tell them that I stuffed the beer up, and yeah, had to eat humble pie there. And the whole team is calling me up on that mistake, even you. So now the ward knows. Yeah, you do.
You got to share these things. So it makes you feel better about it, because we've all had similar episodes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was it was a regrettable day that day.
We're all getting thirsty.
Yeah, we're running out of beer pretty fast.
Well, brilliant. Well, I'd really like to thank you guys for giving up your time and sharing your passion, really, because I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? So thank you very much. And maybe we'll see you in Auckland one day, but you probably want to stay far, far away right now. So, and I don't blame you. So we'll see you one day soon. If you want to stay on the call, you're very welcome. I'm sure guys here might want to just continue chatting. So if you want to bow out, you're very welcome.
Thank you. Oh, thanks very much for the opportunity and thinking of us, and thanks for using our products. We are very humbled by this. And if you have any questions, just send us an email. Happy to answer any brewing or malting questions. Just fire through. We'd like you to succeed and brew awesome beers.
Good luck, guys.
Yeah.
Okay. And obviously,
Yeah,
if you
thanks
want
very
to
much.
send
All
our
the best.
homebrew, if you want to send a homebrew group a special pricing, will be appreciated.
Oh,
I think it's time to go, Lance. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
See ya.
Yeah. Bye-bye.